and then I'll share my screen so that we can talk about plant nutrition and plant fertilizers. It's going to be a very important topic. The first thing that I want you to be aware of is that there is no magical cure. There is no silver bullet to the problems with trees. Often people think, well, something wrong is wrong with my plant. What fertilizer should I put? And that may or may not be the problem. In most cases, if you do the things right with trees, you keep a lot of organic matter, you should have no need for fertilization. But if there's a problem with trees, it may be a combination of several different things, and the fertilizer will probably be one of the last ones, or the last one that's going to be causing some problem. So be aware of that. Taking care of your trees, providing the right environment for the trees, it's what's going to be very, very important. And so we get started with just a few more photographs. So last time we talked about the soils, and I mentioned the soil failure. So here is a Aleppo pine, and as you can see, the tree came down, and with it, we have the soil plate. So the roots still attached to the soil, and everything came down. So the fact that the plate is there means that the soil could not hold the tree any longer, and that's why the tree fell, and the tree would have to be removed. Here's some just the other photographs of the root system, and including the pipe, the irrigation pipe that was just growing, going underneath or on top of the root or in close proximity. That also was destroyed. Here's a photograph. This was a very large tree. There's an ex co-worker of mine, just for scale, sitting on the tree. But not every single tree that falls down is going to be a casualty. Keeping in mind that if a tree happens to be out and about where it's not going to hurt anybody, there may be no need for you to remove it. It is the people factor. So if people are in danger of the tree falling on top of, then yeah, that is a very good reason. But when we have an area here, it's an open area. There's no real people to go, or the tree can fall on. This tree fell many years ago. It was never removed. As long as there is some kind of connection of the tree with the root system, and you can see it here, where yeah, there was some roots that were damaged, but they're still kept. The tree still kept some connection, and that was enough to continue feeding the tree. And so here's eventually the tree kind of settled or lay down on the ground, and it's still alive and it's still happy. Perhaps after a couple of months, years, there may be some new roots that will be created from the stem, and the tree will get a brand new root system. So that is very important. It's also referred to as the target. If there is a target, if the tree was in a walkway where the area is highly used by people, so there is a very high target, then yeah, we can remove the tree. But if their target is low, an open area where hardly anybody really goes around, the tree's already on the ground, so it's not going to fall any further, then there's no need to remove it. So you have to make that judgment whether or not to remove the tree. But a tree like this can still live. And so we're going to return to our ideal soil. And I showed this before, and last time we talked about the inorganics, the minerals. So today we get to talk about the organics, the organic, the living material, the leaves, the stems, the byproduct of the soil organisms that are living in the ground, that are feeding on the leaves, are feeding on a lot of the organic matter that will eventually release the valuable nutrients, the vitamins and vitamins and minerals that the tree needs to survive. And as we can see from the ideal soil, it's just 3 to 5%. I mean, not very high, but it needs to be there. And that is what's very important. The nutrients need to be available to the tree. And so I've also shown this before where the tree are constant in a constant cycle of recycling. So they uptake the raw compounds from the soil. They generate new tree mass, new leaves, new twigs, new branches that as time goes by, they're going to drop because they have done their job for the tree. The leaves are going to fall to the ground. They will then rot because of natural processes and or other organisms that are going to help out. And the nutrients are going to be released to the soil where the tree can reacquire them and create more body mass. So this is what the tree wants. And so the soil organisms will play a major role by having a lot of leaves and a lot of organic matter that keeps them supplied with lots of natural food. I also mentioned that the leaves regulate the temperature. So having a nice cool soil, this organisms are going to be actively more active. If it's really hot, and nobody wants to be out there when it's really hot working, so they're going to take a break. So I mentioned before, think about soil as being a living entity, which it is. There are a lot of living things, and adding the organic matter is just simply a way of feeding the soil, which in turn will feed the trees and everything else in the garden. And so when we look at the tree, uh, there are 17 essential elements that are required. And the word require means that they must be given to the tree in order for the tree to complete its normal life cycle. So the other thing that is very important is that each element needs to be given to the tree and cannot be substituted by anything else. So if the tree requires potassium, the tree has to have potassium, and potassium cannot be replaced by boron, copper, or zinc, or any of the other. So it must have some kind of potassium. The other thing that is very important is that this is elements need to be given to the tree in a form that the plant can use. These are the same elements that you will also need, and you probably were eating your Flintstone vitamins because you want it to be healthy and you want it to have all the nutrients so that you can be healthy and happy. And it is exactly the same thing that happens with the trees. So out of the 17 essential elements, carbon, oxygen, and hydrogen, those are going to be in the atmosphere. Those are not going to be, you would have no need to worry about them. Oxygen, obviously, we breathe it. Trees are also breathe it. Hydrogen is very high in the atmosphere. And so those, you don't have to worry about it. And then when we take the rest, we can divide them into two categories, either the macro elements, which macro means large. These are the elements that are going to be required by the tree in large quantities. And then there's going to be the micro elements, the ones that are going to be required very small quantities, but still essential for the tree to be happy and healthy. When we look at the macro, three main ones, the nitrogen, the phosphorus, and the potassium, will be the ones that you would have to replace at some point or another, or those are the ones that you would have to be given the tree when you use any kind of fertilizers, and we'll talk about that later on. So this is where the work of the root comes in. So the roots are going to be mining through the soil. They're going to be looking for some of these vitamins and minerals in some of the reservoirs, in the soil particles. Maybe they hit some pockets where some of them might be hidden, might be hiding. And so as the roots are going to be mining and looking for these resources in the ground, they're going to expand their area and they're going to create a much stronger anchor for the tree. So can the tree survive without some of these elements? The answer is it can survive for several years, but if these elements are not provided to the tree, eventually the tree will die. It may be several years in that process. A tree may go from being very healthy and happy to looking very very unhappy and unhealthy, kind of weak. losing leaves, dropping branches, and then eventually it's going to die. So be aware of that. Now, should you worry about this? The answer is not too much. If you have a lot of organic matter present within the vicinity of the roots, that should be enough. So in most cases, even adding fertilizers for the trees, it's not going to be something that you may need to worry about. So when we look at the three main elements that are going to be required by the tree, nitrogen will be the one that you will need to replace. Nitrogen is going to go through a process of nitrification, and this is going to be where the element is going to be held by the organic matter. So through the process of decomposition and or the actions of the organisms, the nitrogen is going to be released to the plant. However, the nitrogen that is going to be released by the plant may not be in the form that is used by the plant, or it's not going to be water soluble. And that is another very important thing that you need to understand, that all the vitamins, all the minerals, all the plant can uptake or intake is going to be through the water. So the moment that the plant drinks some water, they're going to take some of these elements with it. So it must be in a water soluble form so that the plant can uptake it. It's not like us that we have mouth and teeth and we can chew things. So it has to be water soluble. And so here's just some of the examples. Nitrogen is going to be very important for everything about the plant, especially the chlorophyll, the green pigment that is responsible for making the food of the plant, as well as making protein, as well as just cell walls and everything else. So there is not one specific job that any of these elements will do. They will regulate other elements. They will help in many, many aspects of the plant life. And so that is why they are very important. But the lack of it may exhibit a few symptoms that we can detect from a distance on trees, and that can give us a clue as to what might be the tree might be suffering from or lack of. And so when we look at the nitrogen, this is what's going to happen. Nitrification. Nitrification is going to start with nitrogen gas, and that's it is in the air. It's not going to be in a form that the plant can use. And most often, when you are going to be releasing the nitrogen, the first form is going to be what is known as the ammonia nitrogen. Very few plants can use it in this form. It's going to be in waters insoluble, so it's just going to hang out there. And it's going to have to be broken down into a few more times before the plants can use it. So through the process of nitrification and organisms using it and breaking it down, then it's going to go into ammonium and then nitrite. These are also forms that the plant cannot use, and also they're not really water soluble. The final form is going to be the nitrate. And so the nitrate is the form that every single plant can use. It is also the form when it is water soluble, and that is going to have a negative problem or negative connotation, because the moment that the nitrogen is water soluble means it's going to get picked up by water. And as you water the area, the water will sink it lower than the root zone, not making it available to the plant. Or this would be the problem with the runoff. So excessive water in an area will pick up this nitrogen. And if the water is not sink or does not sink into the soil, then it's going to go into the drain, out into the ocean. And we know there is a serious problem with algae bloom, because algae also have chlorophyll. They carry out photosynthesis. And this extra nitrogen is going to have an algae bloom because it is feeding some of the marine animals. And so that is because the nitrogen is water soluble. And so it's going to be picked up and taken by the water. And so the problem we have with trees is that the water will keep pushing the nitrogen or carrying the nitrogen deeper below the root zone, no longer being available to the plant, or is going to leach it out of the soil via the water runoff and into the ocean, and it's not going to be made available to the plant. And so because of that, those quality or that quality of nitrogen, it would be the only element that you really need to replace if you would have to use some kind of fertilizer. Otherwise, it's always going to be best to have organic matter on top of the tree so that only a small amount of nitrogen is released at one point in time and it's going to be taken by the tree. And if loses it, more organic matter will break down, releasing more later on. So it's going to be a slow release of the nitrogen, ensuring that some is going to be available for the many years the tree is going to be alive. So very important for you to understand that nitrogen is going to be the only one or the only element that you really may need to replace or give to the tree. Nitrogen is going to be movable within the plant. Remember, it is water soluble. So when a plant is lacking in nitrogen, as is common in container plants because they're growing in a medium and the media could run out of no vitamins and minerals because they are leached out every single time you water the plant. And so the very little nitrogen the plant still has within itself is going to be moved towards the more important areas, and that is going to be the growing tips. Because the plant still wants to live, still wants to grow, still wants to flower, still wants to fruit, still wants to carry out its biological function. So it's just going to sacrifice everything else, move the nitrogen to there's the tips, and that's when you're going to have a plant that is going to exhibit the symptoms of having green tips, and the rest of the plant is going to be yellow. Remember, nitrogen plays a very important role in the chlorophyll or the green pigment of the plant. And so in the absence or the lack of nitrogen, the plant is not going to be able to keep that chlorophyll. And so it's going to lose that green pigmentation, and it's going to allow the other colors that are going to be within the plant, in this case, yellow, to be dominant. And that's where you're going to have a yellowish colored plant. And so green tips with the rest of the plant yellow, it's a good indicator that the plant is lacking in nitrogen. Here is eucalyptus. Now, sometimes the lack of nitrogen could be just the fact that it may be a bunch of insects that are constantly feeding on the sap and not allowing the tree to use some of those vitamins and minerals. Or in this case, I think this is Runyon Canyon, very famous in Hollywood for people to go hiking. And it's a eucalyptus tree growing in the middle of nowhere, but no organic matter, nothing that is really feeding the tree. And so it is yellowish in color, and the tree is not very happy. So I think that tree is now dead. So from nitrogen is going to be, the next element is going to be phosphorus. Phosphorus is not going to be movable in the water, so the plant has to literally go out there and find it. It's also absorbed kind of as the plant finds it. The plant will exchange or has an active pump that will absorb the phosphorus and then put it into the vascular system and send it up wherever the plant needs to. Most important, phosphorus is going to be good for flowers. So if you are growing plants for the flowers, the color that will eventually give you the fruit, then the phosphorus will be a very good element that you can manipulate to give you better fruits and better flowers. But in the end, it's still going to act with the other elements to keep the plant healthy and keep it working properly. And or it's going to balance with the other elements to make sure that the plant doesn't go out of whack. It also helps in photosynthesis and or the chlorophyll. So there is going to be some yellowing as well. So the photograph there shows you kind of the green vein effect, sometimes referred to as a Christmas tree effect. There are several elements that will cause this. So in this case, the phosphorus kind of remains, whatever little is available remains within the veins of the plant. Those will remain slightly green, and the rest of the plant or the leaf blade is going to be yellowish in color. So phosphorus will be another one, but not as no, well, I would say not, you won't probably have to replace it. In most cases, if you use any kind of fertilizer, phosphorus will be included, or the plant can dig it out of the ground because it's not water soluble. It does not have a problem of sinking or going below the root zone or being washed away with the water runoff. And then potassium is going to be the third and of the larger elements, good for the immune system and just the overall health of the plant. It's also good for having a very strong root system. So in the absence of it, here's a photograph. It just shows you some marginal burn on the leaves and just a little bit of off color here and there. But that's about it. Once again, you probably will never have to replace your potassium because it's not going to leach out of the soil and or it's going to go below the root zone. So just a few of those benefits. So when we are looking at the fertilizer, once again, we are going to assume that this is going to be a tree in a well manicured landscape where they will rake the leaves. They are not going to allow the twigs to remain. All that we are referring to as litter is going to be clean because we want a nice manicured area. So in such a situation, yes, you will have to use a fertilizer every so often. Now, in most cases, when people fertilize their other shrubs or even their lawn, the roots of the tree will be also among them. So you're probably going to be fertilizing them as well. But in rare cases, you might just be specific to fertilize the tree, and we'll show you a few of the techniques that are out there. So when you're looking at the fertilizer bag, here's just a sample. There's going to be a fertilizer analysis that you just need to be familiar with so that you can understand what the bag is about. So when you are going to be looking at the fertilizer bag, you will always find three numbers. If the product is sold as a fertilizer, it must have these numbers. Chicken shit, cow shit, bunny shit is not a fertilizer. It's just organic matter. And so you will not find these elements or the analysis, the three numbers. But most of the synthetic products, the human-made recipes that have been analyzed, if they are sold as a fertilizer, then they'll have these three numbers. The numbers always relate to the nitrogen, the phosphorus, and the potassium, always in that order, and they are known as the NPK of the fertilizer. So the nitrogen 20, the phosphorus 6, and the potassium 4. So when you look at those three numbers, if the three numbers are present and you can see them on the back, then that is going to be a complete fertilizer because it has the three main elements that the plant will need the most, the nitrogen, phosphorus, and potassium. When you look at the image here, it has 26.6. So when you see those numbers and they are the same, 20, 20, 20, 10, 10, 10, then when the numbers are the same, then that is going to be a balanced fertilizer. If you are not sure, you should always get a balanced fertilizer and a complete fertilizer because that will ensure that you're adding the same amount of the elements that the plant will require. So 20, 20, 20, 10, 10, 10, 5, 5, 5, those are going to be the standard numbers that you will see. The number is a percentage. So you're not adding 20 pounds of the nitrogen, you're not adding 20 pounds of the phosphorus, you're not adding 24 pounds of the potassium. It's a percentage on a 100-pound bag. So if this was a 100-pound bag, then yes, I will have 20 pounds of nitrogen, 6 pounds of phosphorus, and 4 pounds of the potassium. That's only 30 pounds. And this is 100-pound bag, which means that the extra 70% of the bag is going to have what is referred to as inert ingredients. There's going to be some kind of product that is going to make the fertilizer better suitable or better for the plant to uptake. There's going to be some other chemicals. There's going to be a bunch of other things. So they call referred to as inert ingredients. So it's a percentage. So all the fertilizers that you're going to use needs to be given to the plant in a liquid form. If you use a granular fertilizer, you will have to water the plant so that it's going to become into a liquid, and then the plant's going to be able to uptake. And then depending on your choice, there's going to be inorganic fertilizers, the one that come from the lab. This would be your Miracle Grow, or there's going to be your organic fertilizers, the one that have a natural, derived from a natural source like animal shit or manures. There's also sewer sludge, which is human waste product that is treated, and you can use it as an organic fertilizer. So I would recommend that you read the label on the fertilizer if you're using the organic or the inorganic, so that you can see what the ingredients are, so that you know if you're using human or sewer sludge, which is nothing more than a organic fertilizer from human waste. Uh, if nothing else, I mentioned having space for the tree. So here is a done redwood, and there was grass around this tree before, and the grass got removed. Grass and trees do not mix well. In most cases, the tree was going to lose. And so here's where they got rid of the grass. They add layers of organic matter, sometimes referred to as wood chips, sometimes referred to just as compost, depending on the source. And so they will break down, and you would have to replace them every once in a while. You also have a nice area for a lot of water and for the roots to grow. So ideally, this is what the environment for the tree should be if you were to have it in a cultivated area. However, this is not a manicured landscape. This is not a pristine landscape. This is more of a wild landscape that is made for the health of the tree, not for the beauty of the person. So we have also a coast redwood that we'll see later on. So you see there's still some landscape, some areas, but most of it is going to be covered by some kind of organic matter that will break down and release the vitamins and minerals to the tree. Do I ever need to fertilize these trees? The answer is no. All of the elements, the vitamins and minerals that they require are going to be provided to them by the rotten organic matter that I keep placing on top. You would have to replace it every couple of months because organic matter breaks down, just like leaves will rot and go away. So you would have to replace it, and that would be the natural cycle recycling of the trees. Here's, I mentioned before, this is the oldest tipu tree in Elysian Park by Dodger Stadium. I am right about here, somewhere with this group. This is the LA Garden Club. When I gave them a tour of this arboretum, this is a Chavez Ravine arboretum planted in 1890. So this is a Tipuana tipu, the oldest that I know, probably the first one planted in LA. And so here's in a park. It has grass around it, which I am not too happy. And we're moving forward, hopefully, with removing a lot of the active sports or active recreation, because that's not good for the trees, and having more of a passive recreation where people can walk, meander, relax underneath the tree without having to worry about a ball hitting them in the face. So for many years, it has been the active recreation, the sports has been given priority, and hopefully we'll move away from that and value the trees more and make the areas suitable for the trees. So the first thing that I will do is going to be get rid of the grass. The grass are going to compete with the trees. The roots of the grasses are going to cover the surface of the soil, which will take a lot of the water first, a lot of the vitamins and the minerals, and whatever is left over is going to go to the trees. So that's why you don't want to have any kind of grass. I'm going to say at least within the drip line of the tree. That means the canopy. So from the top leftmost leaves to the rightmost leaf, that would be the drip line of the tree. So I would remove every inch of grass below that so that I would at least have that space with organic matter for this tree and get rid of the grass that will be competing. So the tipo tree right here. Here's a very nice Brazilian pepper. We'll get to do this one later. Very well pruned, but it's mixed with everything. So it has a lot of shrubs growing out around it. It has some grass that is well cared for. The tree is happy, so I'm sure it's taking advantage of the extra water from the grass and the other shrubs, and maybe some of the fertilizers that are being used for the other shrubs. So this would be the case where the tree is happy in its place, even though it's not receiving all of that organic matter. It's still getting some good vitamins and minerals from fertilizers or just the regular care of the other plants. And so when we mentioned before, these are the elements, and I mentioned last time about the soil pH, that around here is not a big problem. As long as you have organic matter, everything else is okay. But when you are dealing with back east, where there's a lot of rain and it leaches out some of the nutrients and or changes the pH of an area, then you may have the absence or the abundance of certain elements. And so we have a problem here, not with trees, but with camellias and azaleas that they always turn yellow because they don't, they like more of an acid type soil, which we don't have too much of it here. And so it is not uncommon for them to have their own fertilizer that is made for camellia and azaleas because it's the iron is going to be the main element, is not going to be available to them or not in the quantities that they like. But a few plants like those are going to be more of a problem for the landscape, but trees will rarely have this any of these problems here. So a couple of ways that you can fertilize the area. So we have the surface where we have a walk behind spreader. So the fertilizer goes into this container, and as you walk, it's going to broadcast the fertilizer. Now, once you broadcast it, it is very important for it to reach the roots of the tree, which means that you will have to water it. So water it in. It will be a very good thing if you're going to use fertilizers to kind of keep an eye for the weather so that if you know there's rain coming, then you want to fertilize everything and the rain will do the job for you. Otherwise, turning on the irrigation system is going to be required because the vitamins, minerals can only be absorbed by the tree when they are in a water form or in the water solution. So simple walk behind. This would be the easiest and the quickest way of fertilizing a tree. Is it efficient? No, because most of the minerals, vitamins, minerals are going to be taken by the grass, maybe by the other shrubs, maybe by some of the other plants, and the remains will go to the tree. And a lot of the same elements that the trees are going to need are also going to be used by the organisms in the soil, the bacteria, the fungi. And so they will take another big chunk of all the fertilizers, the vitamins and minerals that you put on the soil. So there's a lot of competition. So not the best, but it's the easiest one that you can use. Here are just some of the handheld spreaders. So you have a small area and you want to broadcast evenly the fertilizer, then you can use something like this. And you can see here where Frank, a no student of mine, was fertilizing the grass in the back of MN. Shows you how they spread it. Or for a little bit better and or a liquid fertilizer, you can use the drill hole method. And here is showing you where you would drill. So you would drill holes about 1.5 or every foot, 2 feet. Here's 2 feet. And here's a tree. And so right around the bark or the stem of the tree, those roots are not actively absorbing anything. They are there for anchorage. What's important for you to understand is that the tips of the roots or the area on the outside of the tree is where the feeder roots are going to be located. So never use any fertilizer, never use any water right at the trunk. And I've seen many people with hoses watering trees and they're watering the trunk of the trees. which is not good. It's all waste of water and waste of fertilizer. So with this drip hole method, every 2 feet you drill a hole or you insert a very large needle, and you will then pump some of the vitamins, some of the minerals in a liquid form. And so you are delivering it to the different area throughout the drip line of the tree. So the canopy is this very large circle, and that ensures that every single root is going to get something, and that's going to uh, put the fertilizer below possibly the grass roots, so that at least it's not going to be competing with the grass. It's still going to be competing with some of the other organisms, and you might lose some to leaching or runoff
Yeah,
because
that's okay.
it's already in a liquid form, and most likely if you water a lot, it's going to leach out or go below the root zone. But at least you're putting the fertilizer closer to some of the feeder roots where the plant can take more advantage of it. Is this easy? It's time consuming. So every 2 feet, drill a hole, put some fertilizer, 2 feet, drill a hole, put some fertilizer. Yes, it's going to take some time. Some companies will also mix a mycorrhiza fungus spore. So they'll mix it with the fertilizer so that they're also inoculating the roots with an extra mycorrhiza to help them along and become healthy. And so if we look at our tipu tree, you can see the shadow. That probably would be the area that I would drill, which in this case is going to be a lot of holes if I were to fertilize that tipu tree. So never do any kind of work right where the stem of the tree is, because that's not good for the plant. There's some spikes out there that people recommend. I will not recommend this because some of the roots may go there and get the vitamins and minerals, but most often the trees are not going to actively search out for the spikes. So it's just a waste of time, waste of money. But if you want to try them, maybe they work for you. It's not a good thing, so don't bother. Or if you want to make sure that your tree is receives all the vitamins, minerals, and it's not going to compete with anything else, and not going to compete with the grass or the organisms, then you can do a direct injection into the vascular system. There's a lot of companies that have some of these products. You can use it to inject the tree with fertilizers, vitamins, minerals, with pesticides for killing insects, with fungicides if it happens to have a disease or other problem. Is it good for the tree? It's not competing. You're putting the vitamins and minerals in the vascular system when the plant can take optimum use of them and not waste anything to the environment, pollution, but you are injuring the tree. So you have to drill a hole into the tree to reach the vascular system. Over time, that hole can be a place, point of entry for rotten fungi or other organisms. So you are wounding the tree. Good or bad. There's some benefits to it, but there's also some drawbacks to it. So here's a needle that it's used just for that. This is from the Moshe product or another of those products. I think they gave me some of these needles. I have them here. So you would put the product here, and then you would insert the needle into the vascular system of the tree, probably pre-drill it because these needles are not very strong. And then you also got to make sure that you don't drill too deep beyond the vascular system, the xylem of the plant. Otherwise, you're going to be injecting the wood, which is then not going to be as useful for the plant. So you have to make sure that you inject or you drill deep enough to go into the vascular system, but not beyond and not too far back, because then you're going to be putting it on the bark, and that's not going to be good. So there's some tricks to it, and practice that will need to happen for you to get the feel for it. And obviously, every single tree will be very different. The ones that have a very thick bark will require a deeper hole. The ones like eucalyptus that have a very thin bark that peels every year, you would almost have to drill a very tiny hole to get to the vascular system. So you also have to be aware of the tree so that you would make sure that you get it where the plant needs it. And then it's going to be the fertilizer uptake. So as the fertilizer gets into the soil particles, as the fertilizer goes into the water, There's going to be the uptake of it by the plant. There's also the problem with a lot of your synthetic fertilizers in what is known as a fertilizer burn. Keeping in mind that if you use Miracle Grow, you are using a type of salt. And so salt, saline conditions are not good for plants. It's not good for you either. So when people use a lot of fertilizer on a specific area, they are going to raise the salt content of the soil, which is going to be a problem. So what's important here is that water is going to respect a very important law of nature that is known as diffusion. Diffusion tells us that a product or an element is going to move from an area of very high concentration to an area of low concentration. And that's going to be very important for you to understand because when we have a plant, a tree that is very happy, it's going to have a lot of water inside. There's the plant, inside the roots, inside the stems, inside the leaves. And it's going to have a nice balance. And if I were to use a lot of fertilizer and I'm going to broadcast it on top of the soil, and that's going to go into the soil, now I have raised the salt level in the soil. Now the water level in the soil is going to be very, very low because of the salt. And so because through diffusion, water is going to go from a very high area, meaning inside the plant, to a low area, meaning to the soil. So because of the extra salt that I have added to the soil by the fertilizer, the water from the plant is going to be literally ripped away. It's going to be going from the tree to the soil. And as a result, the margin of the leaves or the further extremities or the extremities of the plant are going to suffer from lack of water. They're going to burn or suffer what is known as the burning. They're going to dry out and there's going to be a problem. So it's going to give the appearance of burning, and that is why it is referred to as fertilizer burn, but it's nothing more than the water being robbed from the plant where it's high concentration and get sucked out of the plant into the soil where the water is going to be low concentrations. So it is very important that you follow the directions of the label so that if it says you use 2 pounds of fertilizers per 1 tank of 20 pounds of water, then that's what's going to be the case. You need to follow that because adding too much salt fertilizer will be a problem and you can kill the tree. Now, if you know you made a mistake and you added a lot of fertilizer to the area, you can go there and leach out some of the salt. You have to use a lot of water, but you can eventually leach it out. It's going to go into the ocean and cause a bigger problem, but that's a different story. You at least save the tree. But you can leach out some of the salts. You can leach out some of those extra fertilizers. Or when you water the area, you are bringing more water. So you're lifting or raising the water in the soil so that it doesn't have to be robbed or not as all of it has to be robbed from the tree. So you're putting the higher concentration of water in the soil. So that's a fertilizer burn that will occur if you add a lot of the synthetic fertilizers to the ground, which is not good for the plant in the long run. And here is a different example. These are coast redwoods. Now, here's one of the few ones that I've seen around here that are going to be very, very happy, and it looks really happy and really good. However, when you are going to be looking around the city, many of them are not going to be happy and they're going to be declining and they're going to die. So these are coast redwoods that are found within golf courses. Now, many of the golf courses have moved away from regular water and they use reclaimed water. Reclaimed water that has the product of toilets and everything else, but it has a higher percentage of salt. It has a higher percentage of nitrates or nitrogen, and it is high enough where it's becoming poisonous to the coastline redwoods that are very sensitive to the salts and all of that. And so when they started irrigating the grass in golf courses, they slowly but surely started killing the trees. And the trees began to decline. They suffered the marginal burn from the leaves because of the extra salts from the water. And eventually they died because they're just not happy to begin with. And so here's the case where the water and the extra salt, the extra vitamins, minerals from the human product is killing trees. And as you look at different coast redwoods out there, especially in golf courses that have reclaimed water, this is going to be a problem. And so we'll see a lot more of this happening as other areas adopt the reclaimed water. Right now, the city of Long Beach will require a lot of time and a lot of money to run reclaimed water to every single house and or every single neighborhood. But as you start seeing the use of reclaimed water a lot more in the landscape, we'll begin to see more problems with plants not liking that extra salt, extra vitamins, extra minerals, and all of that. So we've already seen it with coast redwoods and reclaimed water. Here's a magnolia, once again, probably could use a little more space, but for now it's okay. So it has a tree that is gone away from the trunk, the grass gone away from the trunk, and it has a nice area with organic matter that will be supplying the vitamins and minerals the tree want. So this is a very happy magnolia. Here's that hay tree from Paramount, that historic tree, the camphor tree, one of the oldest one in the area, not too far from Long Beach. I think it's on Bellflower, just as you cross into Paramount or Paramount Civic Center. So historic site, and I showed that before, but once again, there is nothing around it, only just organic matter, leaves that are being allowed to drop to the ground, not being raked, no grass to compete, maybe just a little bit of water here and there on the perimeters, and the tree is very happy and very healthy. Here's some palms that are not too happy, but this is not so much the area below. This, I wanted to show you a problem with the pink rot. I mentioned with the Canary Island date palms that there is a new disease that will kill them, and they're no longer there. They're dead, both of them, I think. The hosewood was right here, the old one, and you see two of them. One that the leaves are a lot smaller and not too happy. I also mentioned on one side of the leaf, it's going to wilt and die, whereas the other is going to look normal. And so this is very typical. You have one that is very happy and healthy, and then one that has a pink rot that will gradually begin to kill it. And now the palm is dead, and I can guarantee you, like, it's gone. But this is just side by side a healthy palm versus a unhealthy one that has been infected with the pink rot disease. And so with that, I think that's the last one. Are there any questions on the vitamins, minerals, fertilizing of the trees? Again, are fertilizer necessary? No. If you add the organic matter, if you keep the leaves, if you keep some of the trash or the litter that we keep calling litter to rot and allow the tree to recycle its own leaves, its own fruits, its own twigs, then you don't need to spend money. And overall, the soil is going to be happy, and everything else, all the living organisms will have plenty of food, and everybody's going to be happy and healthy. So any questions?
Are there any plants or trees that don't like their own organic matter?
No. So that's nature. So they will rot and they will use it. Are there any other trees that are going to be even more sensitive to some of these elements? The answer is yes. So there are very expensive plants known as Banksias and Proteas that come from Australia, where their they grow in even poorer soil than us. And they are extremely sensitive to phosphorus. And so they have special roots that are able to sequester the tiny amounts of phosphorus from the soil. But when you grow them here and you fertilize them with your regular fertilizer, you're adding so much phosphorus that you kill them. And that's a big problem with people killing their proteas. But no, the organic matter, it's just the plant will know. So some of the ones that have smaller leaves, obviously they're going to have less mass, less vitamins and minerals, so it's not going to be as high. But because the organic matter breaks a little bit at a time, there is not going to be a problem with an overdose, because only a small amount is going to be released to the plant at one given point in time. Uh, and even if the plants were to have some kind of chemicals, like eucalyptus, they're known to have a lot of the oils in their leaves. So over time, they kind of generate their own little environment with only them can grow and a few other very strong plants. But that's a way of stopping competition. But over time, as the leaves rot, they'll use the vitamins and minerals. So they may use something to keep plants away, but not in a way that they don't get harmed or injured or killed by their own organic matter that is rotten and releasing the vitamins and minerals. So the word that you may want to look at is called allelopathy, and that is where a plant, and I'm going to bring the walnuts as an example, can release chemicals into the soil to keep other plants away, or again, makes an area not hospitable to other plants. So, but no, not from the organic matter.
Cool.
I think the other example that I can bring, we've seen two pine trees. Uh, the pine needles with the resin can also change the environment around them. So in most cases, you probably see very little things growing underneath pines because of the needles and the resin and all of that. So again, it's just a way of keeping other plants from competing with them, and only baby pines can survive. So those will be another example of a tree that could just change the area around them. Any other questions? All right. Well, thank you. I'll stop the recording and have a great